Welcome back to Capital After Hours. You know, I was reading the Hartford Courant, and when I saw this come up, an op-ed piece from my friend Paul Gionfriddo, that he was moving back to Connecticut, and he gave the reasons why, I knew that was good news for us because we were going to get him on our panel and talk about what he's doing and why he did this. There, Paul Gionfriddo, former mayor of the great city of Middletown, former legislator who I served with back when I was a child, and you were a child too. You were there in '79. Yeah. I got there in '84. So you served how many years in there?
11.
11 years, right? So he wrote a piece called, "After 20 years away, we moved back to Connecticut, here's why." Now, my Republican friends over there are the ones that are always bemoaning the fact of the outbound migration. My Democratic friends over here are always people saying that things are not that bad. So you would obviously agree with them.
Well,
as a Democrat.
Those of us who are in the middle, right, think that we all love Connecticut. And I didn't stop loving Connecticut in the 20 years I was away. I liked living in Florida. I liked living in Austin, Texas. I've enjoyed living in Alexandria, Virginia. These are all great places with great people, but so's Connecticut.
Yeah. I don't think there's any disagreement there. I think we're here because we love Connecticut and we want to make it a better place. I don't think there's anyone rooting for failure on our side. I think pointing out things that are wrong is how you get to a place where things can get better, and I think you're doing that with your mental health advocacy and your work there. So I think, you know, acknowledging that something is wrong and trying to fix it doesn't mean that you're rooting for failure.
But I also think, as you point out in your story, that the grass is greener is not always greener. You point out that the roads are better in Connecticut, our educational system is better in Connecticut, our access to health care is better in Connecticut. So basically, so why would everybody move? The taxes are an issue.
Well, taxes are certainly an issue. It was less expensive in taxes to live in South Florida, but the insurance costs were a lot more expensive. And so it's really kind of, you know, how you want to, in some respects, spend your money. But in other respects, it's where do you feel comfortable? I mean, South Florida is a beautiful place. It's warm weather all the time. You know, we're close to the beach. There's a lot of good people there. But Connecticut's a beautiful place in a different way. And so you kind of have to look at both those things and weigh them. And I think people can be happy in a lot of different places. The thing that I noticed in the 20 years I was away was that, you know, as I follow the media in Connecticut, it wasn't just that people were negative, because to me, being critical of issues or problems makes sense. I mean, that's what I love about Connecticut, is that people are willing to engage. And I mentioned that in the piece that I wrote. People are willing to engage across the philosophical spectrum. It's then a number of other places I live, people just aren't engaging anymore. They just accept the reality that they're in. Don't try to make it better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, you know, one of the issues I think a lot of people have talked about is moving away for jobs, right? Like my brother and his husband didn't really want to move to Texas, but the industry that my brother's in, that's where all the jobs are going. So, you know, I think it's part of a cyclical issue about, you know, what are we going to do to make Connecticut a better place? And I think creating opportunity for jobs is important, and it helps improve the mood.
We also have thousands of jobs that we can't fill because we haven't done a good enough job connecting the needs of the employers to the higher education system. You know, Jen Widnes at the Connecticut Conference of Independent Colleges talks about this all the time. So there are some people who move away for jobs depending on what industries, but there are plenty of jobs here. We just have to do a better job of training people for them.
And recruiting people from out of state to move here and making it more enticing for them to do so.
So did you bring anybody with you?
Your wife? Not only did I bring my wife, but we brought our daughter and we brought our grandson to take advantage of the educational system, and she's taking advantage of the jobs that were available and already got jobs.
There you go.
You're a creature of politics like we all are here. So how do we, we're in the throes of a gubernatorial election, as you know.
Really?
What message would you give to the two candidates running for governor in Oz, too, about how do we prosecute this? How do we get the Paul Gionfriddo message out?
Well, I think they have to not just kind of feel bad about the way things have gone. You know, people say, and I understand this, there's a lot of headwind in Connecticut in terms of, you know, the way people feel about the state and the way they feel about the way the state was governed. Certainly they don't think that they're doing as good a job these days as we did back in the 1980s. But then again, the 1980s...
Things always look better in the rear.
The 1980s, they said we weren't doing as well as they were doing in the 50s and 60s. Right. But I do think that, you know, it does start from understanding where common interests lie. You think about something like education. I mean, you know, Connecticut really, find a state that's got a better higher education system than the state of Connecticut does in the combination of public and private sector colleges and universities. it would be hard to do so. And so you can build from strengths and understand, as we do with mental health, talk about the strengths that you've got, how you build from those strengths, and use those strengths to fix problems. Now, me, I'm an old budget balancer. I was an old liberal Democrat who really didn't like to spend money. When I was mayor, I cut my budgets and stuff. But for me, it does start with budget balancing, but that's a balance for both candidates and the other candidates too, to just sort of say, what is the right mix of services and taxes? And it's not hard. It's not easy to figure that out.
And when you talk about wanting to come here for our educational system that's not free, we have to invest in it, and that comes from our taxes, and eliminating a large portion of how we're able to fund our services. It comes down to, do you want to pay taxes and have good services and a good educational system, or do you want to go somewhere where, like you're saying, you're just kind of paying for it in a different way?
Well, that's a good segue. The second reason I wanted to have Paul on was his because he is CEO of Mental Health America, and he wrote this book, and it's called Losing Tim, right? Mm-hmm. And it's how I helped create a flawed mental health system that's failed millions in my son. Paul is a rare politician who basically realized that what he did when he was a legislator, when it came to our mental health system, was wrong. And he writes in the book, and he writes in the article that I urge you to read, how we need to fix it. And so much of what we do today when it comes to gun violence, when it comes to sexual abuse that we're seeing right now in the news, is mental health issues. And where did we go wrong back then? How are we trying to fix it? What do we need to do in Connecticut to fix it?
Yeah, I think that the mistake that we made at that time was in believing that doing nothing would be a better option than having people in institutions. And so when we moved people from institutions, which we needed to do, we didn't just deinstitutionalize them, we reinstitutionalized them. We didn't just move them out of our state hospitals, which were just custodial care institutions that weren't getting the job done. We moved them into a different kind of custodial care institution called county jails and state prisons that are also not getting the job done. What we need to do is back up and really understand that people with serious mental illnesses can be productive, can be independent, are not to be feared. My son Tim is not to be feared, but they need to be given opportunities to build from the strengths that they've got. And we need to listen to them about the kinds of strengths that they have. And we need to recognize that everybody's got expectations. And just because you've got a serious illness, whether it's a mental health condition, whether it's cancer, which has touched my family deeply and closely this year as well, no matter what it is, you still got aspirations. And the mistake that we made was in misunderstanding, first of all, that, and then misunderstanding that mental illness is a primarily disease of childhood. 14 is the cutoff age. 50% of mental illnesses emerge by the age of 14.
And I think the point you make in a day and age where our municipalities are mandate phobic. You point out that maybe Adam Lanza would have been picked up in the school system if there were more resources devoted to that at that age.
But as someone who also has someone in my family who is greatly impacted by mental health, bipolar, schizophrenic, I know a little bit about this on a personal level. She lives in Vermont, where the Vermont system is a little bit more progressive, but still, if she didn't have resources through our family and family that cared about her, she'd be picking through the garbage in Burlington, okay? Yeah. And we have this problem in this state, in this country. It's a national disgrace, and both parties are responsible for it, that we stigmatize mental health. We shovel them off in nonprofit group homes. We do not, it's not even a question of money. We don't have the right people advocating for these folks to keep them healthy, connected, and in an environment that's safe. We're throwing mental health people in with other people with other issues. They have no business commingling together, and it creates an incredibly dangerous, unhealthy system.
Well, in the last minute we have, how do we fix it?
Well, and
that's you're not going to say that in a minute.
No, because Chris's points are just so important to underscore, to say how do we fix it, because my son's in San Francisco now, which also is considered a really good system. But if we didn't have resources, same thing to put in to get him housing, to get him back off the streets, things like that. That's all he would be, is on the streets. So how we fix it, I think, is by recognizing this cuts across philosophical boundaries, political boundaries. We get support from all sides on this one. But the problem we have is that people continue to lapse back into gaming it politically, and not understanding that this one we can set all that stuff aside and just understand that what we're doing to families. What we're doing to kids, what we're doing to their families is just not right. And in believing that collectively we can work together to say, okay, give people opportunities in school when they're kids, give them opportunities to have housing, give them opportunities to have employment. If my son wants a job, he's 34 years old, he wants a job, nobody will hire him because he's got schizophrenia. And he doesn't look like the kind of guy you want to hire. But this is what people want.
Don't we need to do a better job also of paying the people who take care of those or help those with mental illness? Don't we need to do a better job of making sure that we value their work and pay them a decent wage?
Not just them, but people with lived experience. Yeah. Pay them, because this is the biggest area, is peer-to-peer work, and peer workers
or
can
family.
actually work.
Or family.
Yeah. I mean money follows the person was a great thing that I lived in a state that didn't even use money follows the person. So you couldn't even get dollars into the families. And so, and that again cuts across boundaries because only a few states never used that program. So there's so much that's out there and available to us. It's just we didn't know. And we could claim naivete in the 1980s, right? We didn't really know because we were just doing this. People today know. And when they double down on the mistakes that we made, they know better.
Well, as unaccustomed as we are on this set of having a thoughtful discussion, you just saw one, guys. I encourage you to read his book, Losing Tim. We'll have a link to the article up on our website and Twitter. Thanks for joining us.